So, for chapter 7, Sarah, get back to your assigned seat. Don't move again. All right. So for chapter 7, we watched the video that told us the historical context of Jesus. Oh, there we go. Of Jesus' passion, and so we've got the historical context, but I still want you to read through what the Gospels say, because the Gospels are the faith story. And on your quiz and in your book goes into detail on the agony in the garden, but for the rest of the Passion, it tells you to kind of refer to this chart. But the chart is it's difficult to see on the PowerPoint, and it's also somewhat difficult to see in your textbook as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the events of the Passion in your families, and since they know in elementary school and for your religion classes it doesn't go into a lot of detail, I'm sure most of you haven't ever read through the entire Passion narrative to see what it's about. Am I right in assuming that? Yeah. However, to read through the whole thing, and we were going to read through the Gospel Synopsis, which compares the 4 Gospels, because it's not the same in all of them. To read through the whole thing takes a long time to really carefully read it and analyze it, so we're going to do it in groups. And what you're going to notice is the order is different depending on which Gospel you read. So for your test, just know the order of this chart that you see right in front of you and the order that your book presented it in, because as you're going to see, it's not in the same order in every gospel. So I wanted to point that out to you. But the document we're going to be using is called a gospel synopsis. And you're going to get a paper copy in class, and you're going to get a paper copy of the handout, because I think it's too hard to read on a computer screen. But I need to show you how you read a synopsis. So let me see. Where did I put it? Here it is. So you're going to get this this copy of this synopsis. And so if you look up at the very top, there we go, almost there. All right, so at the very top, you'll see right up here is a page number. This is the page this is from in the synopsis book. And when you look at the handout I gave you, I think in the packet, one of the pages gets repeated twice. So if you're reading something and it seems out of order, check the page number. If the page is out of order, you'll know that. Then with the synopsis, you'll see it has all 4 Gospels side by side. And it's arranged based on similar narratives. So for example, it'll give you a title. Right here, this is the start of the Passion narrative, and it begins with the going to Gethsemane, and Jesus' death is permitted. This little number here, 305, is where you can reference it in the glossary, but you're not going to be using the glossary, but I just wanted to tell you what those numbers were in case you wanted to know. And then here you'll see Matthew 26, 1 through 5, that's where it is in Matthew's Gospel. Mark 14, 1 through 12, that's where it is in Mark's Gospel. So it's giving you the references for where you find it in the Gospels. These numbers here where it says number, that's comparing it to one of the other places in the Gospel Synopsis, and that's where you can find it. But for the most part, what yins are going to do is you're going to get this handout, and it looks like this. And you're going to get the handout, and you're going to read through the narratives that were outlined in your book for the Passion of Jesus, and you're going to first decide which of the Gospels are most similar. So if it's Matthew and Mark, check Matthew and Mark. If there's something that isn't in one of the Gospels, you can put it's not in there. Then you're going to list some of the major differences between the Gospels on the other side. And there's not a lot of space, so just make brief notes. And so what you're going to do is you'll divide this up in your families, because it would take a really long time for just you to read the entire thing by yourself. So divide it up in your families. There's 11 sections, and so divide it up based on how many people are in your families, and then circle together and share what you read and what you learned. And so for this assignment, you can share your answers. So for the chart, everyone will have probably the same answers. But don't just hand each other the charts. I want you to discuss it and share. And, if someone might have a question, like, if they might want to ask you something about what you read. So discuss it and share what you learned, and then everyone fills in her own chart. And then for the analysis, this actually asks you to consider what overall, then read through your chart, what events are the same or pretty much the same in all four Gospels. And then put 3 sentences for each question, please. So list them. You could just list bullets, but do that in complete sentences. Why do you think all the evangelists agreed on those points? So have at least 3 in the 3 sentences why you think they agreed. Then for number 4, why do you think the evangelists? Oops, did I skip one? Yeah. Then you list at least 3 differences. And then why do you think the evangelists took a different take here, and what difference does it make? 3 sentences. And then 3 sentences for the last question. Why do you think the evangelists wanted their audience to take from the story, and then what do you take from the story? So that's the chart, and I just want to go back to the synopsis and show you how to read it. So you have your synopsis, and let's take, for example, let's see here. Well, we'll just do this first page here. So this is telling about, I don't even think anyone has this on their chart, but this is telling, it's the title, Jesus' death is premeditated. So this is the plot to kill Jesus. And what I would recommend when using the synopsis is, since Mark was the first gospel and it's the shortest one, I would start with Mark and then see how the other evangelists go from Mark. Because Matthew and Luke both use Mark as a source, and then John is entirely different. So, and I'll talk about John in a second. So, in Matthew's gospel here it says, "Now it was 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest him by stealth and kill him, for they said, not during the feast, lest there be a tumult of the people." So this is them deciding how to kill Jesus. And if now we compare it to Matthew, the first thing you see right away is Matthew's longer. Well, let's see what he added. When Jesus finished these things, he said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days of the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. So Matthew adds Jesus predicting his own death. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. Matthew also adds the name of Caiaphas. And they took counsel together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth. But they said, not during the feast, lest there be a tumult among the people. So the main 2 differences there are Jesus predicts his passion, and then they mention in particular who the chief priest was. Then for Luke's gospel, he has much shorter. He edited some stuff out that apparently he didn't think was important. Now the Feast of the Unleavened Bread drew near, which is called Passover, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to put him to death. He doesn't mention any stealth or anything, for they feared the people. So we notice here that Luke is much more brief. You could, venture, why do you think Luke decided to edit, be more brief? Now, or perhaps the better question is, why does Matthew add so much? Because in a certain sense, Luke and Mark are very much like each other, but Matthew adds a lot. Now, John's gospel is very different. Notice what's different about the writing in John's column. It's really small, right? That gives you a clue that this isn't in John's gospel in the same place in the narrative flow as it is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's very small, and it comes from John 11 because it doesn't come from the same context. And in that small writing, it says, "So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on thus, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation." So first of all, this is showing you that this doesn't come in the Passion narrative as it does in the other 3 Gospels. It's coming from an earlier place in John's Gospel. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You do not understand that it is expedient for you that one man should die for all the people, and that the whole nation should not perish." He did not say this of his own accord, but being the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from on that day, they took counsel on how to put him to death. So again, the reason why that writing is smaller is it's coming from a very different part in the narrative. And then sometimes you'll notice there will be blanks. That means that story isn't included at all in the other three Gospels. So anytime you're reading it and you see the little writing, it means it's in the Gospel, but in a different place or in a different order. That's how you use the synopsis. Now, what you're going to do, again, divide it up. If you have any questions, if you don't understand what you're doing, if you're having trouble reading it, just ask me. But you're just going to read through and list the major differences. And you just check off the ones that are most similar. So for our example here, just to review, you would check off that Mark and Luke are the most similar. I would say for the major differences, I would say Matthew added some details such as Jesus predicting his passion and the name of Caiaphas. And I would also say John doesn't place this in the passion narrative. And I would also say that John's description of the plot against Jesus is much more detailed and dramatic because he has Caiaphas actually speaking and explaining why Jesus should die. So John actually sort of does the whole political analysis. He has Caiaphas say, hey, Jesus has to die for the sake of the nation. So in that regard, John is a little bit more has more analysis than the other three. So does that make sense? Questions? No? Okay, so basically this is a group. You're going to fill out the chart, your individual part, then you're going to share as a group, complete the entire chart. Once your whole chart is complete, kind of look through, and if you have time, I would skim through and read the entire narrative, maybe just in Mark's Gospel since it's shorter, so that you're familiar with it. But we're going to do this in class. We'll start it this class, and obviously we don't have time to finish it today. We'll finish it next week. But that's what we're doing. I want you to get familiar with what the biblical narrative says. You already know what the historian said in our documentary. Now I want you guys to see what the biblical narrative says. And just incidentally, you'll probably find lots of differences, but of the parts of the gospel, they do tend to agree with each other most in this section compared with the other sections of the Bible. So that's what we're doing. And okay.